install attic ventilation. To learn how to prepare an attic, including how to baffle heat-producing fixtures, watch the video titled How to Prepare Attics for Insulation. A quality loose-fill attic insulation job requires skilled work from both the hose operator and the blowing machine operator. First, place drop cloths on the floor under the attic access door and over nearby furniture. Remember, you want to leave the site as clean as you found it. Next, make sure you know how much insulation you will install. Here, the blowing machine operator checks the work order to determine the R value to be installed on this job. The work order calls for a total R value of R38 when the job is finished. It also indicates R30 needs to be added to the existing insulation to get a total of R38. By knowing the R value to be added and the square footage of the attic to be insulated, the installer can check the table on an insulation bag to determine how many bags of insulation will need to be added. Proper operation of the blowing machine is just as important as knowing how many bags of insulation to install. The blowing machine operator should know how to adjust two important controls on the machine: the material control and the air flow control. The controls on your machine may not work just like these. Before you operate the machine, get your supervisor to show you the proper control procedures. If these controls are not set correctly, your insulation job may not be satisfactory. Here the hose operator is blowing fiberglass. Notice how the insulation floats out of the hose. This is a sign of too much air. Because there is too much air in the insulation, it won't take long for the insulation in the attic to settle below the required depth. Too much air results in too little insulation. The blowing machine operator adjusts for less air and increases the amount of material. After adjustment, notice how the fiberglass comes out of the hose in a heavier flow that is easy to control. Here the installer is blowing cellulose. The insulation is heavy and doesn't fly very far out of the hose. This problem is solved by adjusting for more air. You can see the difference at the hose. To get the right mix of air and material, the hose operator needs to carefully check the flow of insulation at the beginning of each job and tell the blowing machine operator if adjustments need to be made. A good way to check that you're installing the insulation properly is to mark off a portion of the attic that is about 1/4 of the total attic area. When you have finished installing insulation in this area, stop. Check the insulation depth and count the bags you have used. You should find the required insulation depth and that you have used 1/4 the total number of bags you calculated you needed for the whole job. The hose operator should check depth often as the job progresses. This installer carries a piece of lath cut to show the proper insulation depth to get R38. He uses this depth gauge as he moves around the attic. Here is another method. In this truss-framed attic, the installer is using a chalk marker to indicate the fill level on the wood trusses. Start blowing toward the point farthest from the access door. As you blow, work back toward the access. This will keep your hose from damaging baffles or messing up the insulation job. Stand so that you can blow down the length of the joist cavities. Don't blow across the cavities because you will get an uneven fill. Hold the hose horizontally at hip height so the insulation blows out into the attic and falls into the cavities. Around baffled fixtures, you may have to use your hand to deflect insulation so that it doesn't fall inside the baffled areas. Or you could use a temporary cover over the baffle. Remove any insulation that may enter a fixture that has been baffled. If there are soffit or eave vents, make sure the insulation stays under the baffles and doesn't clog the vent. On low-pitched roofs, it may be impossible to get the required insulation depth at the eave with blown insulation. Your work order may include placing high R-value fiberglass batts or rigid insulation out over the top plate of the exterior wall and extending this insulation into the attic several inches until there is room to get the required depth from the blown insulation. In some attics you'll find boards placed over the ceiling joists. If possible, insert the insulation hose under the boards between each ceiling joist, or drill holes in the boards. Blow insulation under the boards, then blow insulation over the top so the total insulation depth is the same as the rest of the attic. Before you leave the attic, inspect it to make sure you have done a thorough and safe job. Pay particular attention to every heat-producing fixture and the soffit or eave vents. If the attic access is from the living space of the home, it also needs to be insulated. Staple faced fiberglass batts to the access door. Hold them in place with twine. Also attach compression weather stripping such as this self-stick foam to the access frame so air won't leak from the room into the attic when the door is in place. Now it's time to complete the certificate of insulation. Take one completed copy and one empty insulation bag and staple both within easy viewing of the attic access. Pick up all your drop cloths and clean up any stray insulation between the access hole and the truck. If you have moved any furniture, return it to where you found it. Finally, ask the homeowner if they have any questions. Then, thank them for having your firm do the work. Remember, install the proper number of bags, adjust the blowing machine for the right mix of air and material, blow insulation to the proper depth, keep insulation out of baffles, insulate the attic access if necessary, and leave the site as clean as you found it. These steps mean a better home for the customer and more business for your company.